We've just seen an absolute crush in round 10 of the candidates between Hikaru Nakamura and Alireza Firouzja. So let's see what happened here. E4 from Hikaru, and here Alireza goes c5, a fighting Sicilian once again. Now knight f3, we had pawn d6, and we go down these opening moves of the Najdorf variation here. Knight f6, knight c3, and pawn a6 starts the Najdorf. And now bishop e3 from Hikaru, he goes for this English attack. And I actually just covered a game yesterday on the channel where Garry Kasparov went knight g4 here against Anand. This is the so-called anti-English, very sharp move, but we didn't have that today. Alireza goes e5, one of the main moves here, or the main move in fact, and knight b3 is the main move for white. The whole idea of that one is you then go queen d2, castles queenside, pawn f3, g4, h4, all that kind of stuff to attack white. But here we had knight f3, more rare and more positional in its nature, because now white wants to go bishop c4 and start fighting for this d5 square here. And there are different moves for black here now, of course. The main one is bishop e7, you allow bishop c4, and the line could go something like this. You get castled, you challenge for the centre, okay, game goes on, bishop b3 is a top move. Top game here is between Carlsen and Vachier-Lagrave. Vachier-Lagrave actually won that one with black. So that's one way to play. You can also go queen c7, stop the bishop c4 stuff straight away. But here we had a very rare move. Whoops, just running it back here. We had knight c6 from Alireza. So he lets the bishop come to c4 already, and we're already getting into the territory of very few games. Here Alireza goes bishop to e6. This knight now hopped into d5 here, and we had rook c8 played because there was a threat to go bishop b6, hit the queen, and then knight c7 check. And now we're down to just 2 games in this position here. Hikaru had a very long think here and chops on f6. Now I've included the clock times here. I'm streaming this off of Chess this time. And you can see Hikaru spent about 30 odd minutes on this move. Both players playing very slowly here. And now there's only 2 games. Both of those, the queen recaptured on f6. But Alireza captures with the pawn, and we're in a completely novel position here. As you can see, the computer doesn't like this move, and it becomes more of a kind of Sveshnikov-y position here, where black's going to try and push for f5 later on maybe, or pawn d5. You know, very double-edged, very dynamic, but very risky as well. So Hikaru now just dropped his bishop back to b3, and now here we had knight to e7 from Alireza. I mean, you could go bishop g7 and castles and that kind of thing, but Alireza's actually playing for a quick d5 here, trying to liberate the position. He also opens his rook, but Hikaru now just castles, and here the bishop actually took on b3. This is the most accurate way to play, because then when you push d5, you've eliminated that bishop, and after captures, you can now recapture with the queen, of course, in this variation. You couldn't with the bishop on b3. But here Hikaru doesn't swap those queens off, of course. He goes queen to e2 because he wants to bring a rook to the d-file, pawn c4. Really tough for black already now. So knight f5 was played by Alireza. We had the rook coming to the d-file. The queen dropped back to c6. And now pawn c4, and I was watching the St. Louis stream with Yasser Serwan and Alejandro, etc. And we had MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, actually dial onto the stream, and he said that he feels this is a very risky way to play against Hikaru, likes these open, dynamic positions, it's not a kind of solid positional battle, and sure enough, this proved really difficult for Alireza now. So after c4, Alireza goes bishop g7, preparing to castle, and now simply rook d5 from Hikaru, the king castled, and the other rook came to the d-file. And white's just absolutely dominating the position already. Black doesn't really have pawn breaks. You've got the only open file on the board with both of your rooks. So that's why Alireza had to play rook f to e8 here. I mean, if he tries to drop the queen back like this, for example, well then you can go queen d3, triple on the file here, hit the knight. Black's just paralysed here. So the rook came to e8, we had pawn h3 from Hikaru, and b5 from Alireza, basically his only pawn break, but it's just no good, because now Hikaru goes pawn c5. I mean, computer doesn't like that move. It's giving the question mark, but it's still just a great move. You take the space, you've got the passed pawn now. Really difficult for black to play. And so Alireza drops his bishop back, attacking that pawn, but pawn b4 solidifies it. And now Alireza just has to try and mix it up. I mean, you can see the time situation here. Alireza's got 19 minutes for 18 moves, and they don't get increment. Hikaru's only got about 32, and so he goes knight d4 here, just mixing it up. If I just run it back a move, there's not so much for black to do. I mean, the computer wants to wait here with, say, queen to e6, but then you can go queen c2, pressuring on those light squares. This is one kind of sample line from the computer. Black shuffles the pieces around, but white can just slowly improve, bring the knight in here. I mean, you just dominate the open file. You've got the passed pawn, you've got the attack on the king, the weak squares. It's just absolutely miserable for the black player here. So that's why Alireza just doesn't want to sit there and die slowly. Instead, he chucks this knight into d4 in this position here, but now Hikaru can capture that one. And if you take back here, well, we can recapture with the rook. Again, just dominant with the extra pawn. So Alireza takes here, he wins the exchange, but the problem with this is his king is now getting ripped to shreds. So the knight hits f5, a beautiful square, especially with the pawns doubled. There's no light squared bishop, there's no knight, so that literally can't be opposed. And now the queen came to e4, it had to get out of the attack of the rook. Hikaru jumps out here. I mean, you can see the writing on the wall. This rook came to the d file, but Hikaru plays a really nice move now, very precise. He shuffles away to a1 here, hits this pawn, and there's also this beautiful attacking idea of lifting the rook to the third and then over to the king side. So rook c6 was played, holding that pawn, maybe holding this one in some variations. Now the bishop came to h6. Very simple play, swap the dark squared bishops, give mate on g7. The king came to h8 here, maybe looking to bring a rook to the g file at some point to defend. And now rook a3 from Hikaru, that one's swinging over, and there's just absolutely nothing Alireza can do in this position. So he chops on b4 here, but he'd have known it was lost at this point. The bishop took on f8, the rook recaptured, queen h6, threatens mate on g7, rook g8, and now rook g3. You eliminate that final defender of the king. There's nothing can be done. Alireza chops here, pawn recaptures, and here he just actually resigns with 2 seconds on the clock. I mean, you can take here with check, king h2, and then the computer literally wants to start doing stupid stuff like this. So absolutely crushed there by Hikaru Nakamura was Alireza Firouzja. Now his preparation has just really not gone right this tournament. You know, 2 Najdorfs against Jan and Hikaru, and he's just been absolutely blown off the board in both of those games. So he hasn't quite got it right. Hopefully he learns a lot from this tournament. Fair play trying to fight, but you know, he has to get that prep sorted, I think, for future tournaments. He's such a talent, but still a lot to learn. But great game from Hikaru, nothing to take away. And do check out Hikaru's YouTube. He covers his own games at the end of each day, so he'll be covering his own thoughts on this game, which will be really interesting. And Gotham Chess also recaps all of the games of the day on his channel, so do check that one out as well. Losing my breath here. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again on the next video. Take care.